Welcome back to 34O. Over the past year, this podcast has taken me somewhere I never expected. When I started, I thought I was making conversations about love, intimacy, and relationships. Today, I think it has become something a little different. It has become a way of exploring what connects us. Last week, I celebrated the first anniversary of the podcast. Today, I would like to begin something new. A series I am calling Collecting Maps. Because after dozens of conversations with psychologists, neuroscientists, therapists, sexologists, authors, and extraordinary people from around the world, I realized something. Every guest seemed to describe human connection differently. Different language, different theories, different models. At first, that felt confusing. Who is right? Which model explains relationship best? Then it struck me. Maybe they're not disagreeing. Maybe they're simply standing on different hills, looking at the same landscape. That is what maps do. No single map tells you everything. A road map will not show you the weather. A weather map will not show you the mountains. A typographical map will not tell you where the cafes are. None of them are wrong. They're simply useful for different purposes. Maybe understanding human beings works in exactly the same way. So these episodes are not about finding the right answer. They're about collecting better maps. Today's question is one that has fascinated humanity for thousands of years. Why do we fall in love? Not how do we find love, and not how do we make someone choose us, but something much stranger. Why this person? Out of 8 billion people, why does one suddenly become different? Why do they occupy our thoughts? Why do ordinary moments suddenly feel extraordinary? Why does one message make your heart race? Why does one smile stay with you for days? I have asked myself that question more times than I can count. Maybe you have too. Because if you've lived long enough, you've probably had an experience that makes no sense at all. You met someone who looked perfect, kind, beautiful, intelligent, emotionally available. Someone your friends thought would be perfect for you. Someone who looked wonderful on paper. And yet, nothing happened. No curiosity, no pull, no spark. Then, months later, someone else walks into your life. Maybe they're not what you expected. Maybe they don't fit your list at all. Maybe they challenge you. Then one conversation changes everything. Suddenly you're checking your phone, reading the same messages twice, wondering what they were thinking. And the rational part of your brain is watching all of this happen and quietly asking, what on earth is going on? I spent a lot of time trying to answer that question. And I want to be honest with you about why. Because this is not a professional curiosity of mine. It's personal. For a long time, I kept falling into the same patterns. I kept asking why the same kind of thing kept happening to me. And this past year, quietly, that question turned around. And by the end of today, I want to tell you where it left me. At first, I thought the answer was chemistry. That invisible thing people talk about. Either it's there or it's not. Simple. Today, I do not think it's simple at all. Because every time I interviewed someone this past year, another piece of the puzzle appeared. One guest talked about dopamine, another about attachment, another about the nervous system, another about timing. At first, it felt like everyone was talking about different things. Now I think they were describing different layers of the same experience, different maps, the same landscape. So today, I would like to open those maps. Not because I think they'll give us one answer. I don't think they will. But together, they might help us ask better questions. Map 1, Biology. Let us begin with the obvious, the body. If you've ever fallen in love, you've felt it physically before you understood it intellectually. Your attention narrows, your energy changes, your appetite changes. You replay conversations. You start imagining futures that did not exist a week ago. Your phone suddenly becomes the most interesting object in the room. Have you ever noticed that? You put it down. You pick it up again 30 seconds later. Nothing has changed. No message, no notification. Still, you check again. That is not weakness. That's biology. Our brains are extraordinary prediction machines. Dopamine is not simply the chemical of pleasure. It is deeply connected to anticipation, to possibility, to uncertainty. It is one of the reasons early attraction feels so intoxicating. Not because you found certainty, but because your brain is imagining possibility. And possibility is incredibly powerful. But here is where biology becomes fascinating. If love were only chemistry, we would all fall for the same people. We do not. Some people leave us completely untouched. The very same person becomes someone's soulmate and someone else's friend. Biology explains why the engine starts. It does not explain why it starts for this particular person. So perhaps biology is the beginning, not the destination. Map 2, Attachment. If biology explains why the engine starts, attachment might explain why it starts for one person and not another. For years, I used to think I was choosing people. Today, I'm not entirely convinced. I think something inside us is often choosing long before our conscious mind catches up. You've probably felt this. You meet someone for the first time. Nothing dramatic happens. No fireworks, just something. You simply feel comfortable. Or perhaps the opposite. You meet someone and they completely unsettle you. You cannot stop thinking about them. You begin reading into every message, every pause, every silence. Why? Attachment theory offers one possible map. It suggests that our earliest relationships quietly shape what love feels like later in life. Not necessarily what love is, but what feels familiar. That is one important distinction. Because familiar is not always healthy. Sometimes familiar is simply familiar. If love in childhood felt unpredictable, unpredictability may later feel exciting. If affection had to be earned, we may confuse effort with intimacy. If closeness often disappeared, distance can become strangely attractive. It is uncomfortable to admit, but many of us do not fall in love with what is healthiest. We fall in love with what our nervous systems already knows how to recognize. Your subconscious will always choose a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. That does not mean we are doomed to repeat the past. Far from it. Awareness changes everything. Once we can see the map we're carrying, we no longer have to let it choose our destination. And here I have to speak personally, because for a long time I kept asking, why do I keep meeting the same kind of people? The question I keep returning to now is, what keeps feeling familiar to me? They're not the same question. One places the responsibility outside of me. The other invites me to become curious about myself. This is not about blaming our parents or blaming our past. Every one of us grew up inside circumstances we did not choose. The point is not to rewrite our childhood. The point is to understand the map it gave us. Because once we understand the map, we gain something extraordinary: choice. But even attachment leaves me with questions. Because sometimes I've met people who felt incredibly safe, and there was no attraction. And other times I felt overwhelming attraction, while something deep inside me knew it was not sustainable. Attachment alone does not explain that. For that, we have to look at the body that is carrying it. Map 3. The nervous system. There is another map that has completely changed how I think about relationships. The nervous system. If you've asked me a few years ago what a nervous system had to do with love, I would probably have given you a blank look. Today, I think it is impossible to understand intimacy without understanding the body. Because before we think, before we analyze, our body has already made thousands of tiny predictions. Is this safe? Should I move closer? Should I protect myself? Most of that happens outside of our awareness. We like to believe we're rational, that we choose who we love. I do not think that is true, at least not at first. Our nervous system is constantly scanning. It does not ask, is this person perfect? It asks a much simpler question. Am I safe? Or sometimes, does this feel familiar? Those are not always the same thing. Imagine growing up in a home where love was unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes distant. Your nervous system adapts, not to sabotage your future, to keep you alive. Years later, you meet someone, unpredictable, hard to read, sometimes deeply present, sometimes emotionally unavailable. Your heart races. You tell yourself this must be chemistry. But what if it's not? What if your nervous system has simply recognized something it had already knows? Not because it's healthy, because it's familiar. That thought stopped me the first time I met it, because it forced me to ask something difficult. Have I always been attracted to people, or have I sometimes been attracted to patterns? I think many of us confuse intensity with intimacy. The butterflies, the uncertainty, the highs and the lows. Do they like me? Will they text? Where do I stand? We've almost been taught that if love does not feel dramatic, it's not real. Movies tells us that. Songs tells us that. But the nervous system tells a different story. A racing heart does not automatically mean you have found your person. Sometimes it simply means your body is working very hard. In my anniversary reflection, I said a sentence I was not sure I believed. Attraction without safety is often confusion dressed up as destiny. I want to stop here a bit and show you why it might actually be true. Not because attraction is not important, it's essential. But attraction becomes something else when it's held by safety. Because safety does not remove desire. It lets desire deepen. When you no longer need to perform. When your body finally exhales. That is where intimacy begins. Still, there is something the nervous system cannot answer. Because even two people who feel safe together, who are drawn to each other, still meet at a particular moment in their lives. And sometimes the moment decides everything. Map 4. Timing. Here's a map almost no one talks about. Timing. You do not just meet the right person. You meet them in the right or the wrong season of your life. The same human being at 25 and at 35 can land in completely different ways. Same person, different you. Sometimes we meet someone wonderful too early, before we can see it. Sometimes too late, when we've already begun walking another road. And sometimes when it ends, we do not actually grieve the person. We grieve the timing. Because readiness is half of the whole equation. An open person cannot reach a closed one, and a closed one cannot be reached no matter how right they are. That one has been humbling for me, because it means I cannot only ask whether someone is right. I have to ask whether I am ready, whether I am open, whether I've done the work that lets someone actually reach me. And here is what all of these maps have in common. Biology, attachment, the nervous system, timing. Every one of them describes the other person, their chemistry, their familiarity, their timing. But none of them describe the person doing the falling. Me. And that is what quietly changed the question this year. For a long time I studied who I fall for, and I spent almost no time on who was doing the falling. I have to be honest about something. I know what it is like to disappear inside a relationship, not because anyone asked me to, because I slowly stopped listening to myself. I became very good at keeping the peace, very good at reading the room, very good at sensing what everyone else needed, less good at asking what I needed. And for a long time, underneath all of it, there was a quiet story. If this relationship works, then I will finally be enough. Seeing that story was uncomfortable, but it changed everything. Because I became less interested in finding the perfect relationship and much more interested in becoming someone capable of creating one. Those are not the same thing. One is about searching, the other is about becoming. So here is the map I'm using now. Not, this is the truth, just, this is where I currently am. Rebuild. Become someone I would actually want to be in a relationship with before I ask that of anyone else. Not because I'm broken, but because I would rather bring a whole person to the table than bring half of one and call the other half chemistry. I do not know if that is the true map. Maybe a year from now I will be using a different one. And that is kind of the whole point. We're not here to find the one true answer. We're trying to get a little better at navigating. So why do we fall in love? Today we open 4 maps. The body, our history, our nervous system, and timing. None of them explains the whole landscape. Maybe none of them ever will. But there is one more question underneath all of them. Not, why did I fall in love with that person? But, who was I when I fell in love? Because every relationship leaves us with two stories, one about the other person and one about ourselves. The first story is interesting. The second one changes our lives. Next time in collecting maps, I want to turn from why we fall to what love asks of us once we have. Whether two people can build a life in the same direction, whether love makes us more ourselves or less. And the strange idea that safety is not the opposite of passion, but the very thing that lets passion deepen. Until then, stay curious, stay honest, stay present, and stay human.